Over 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling with debt they can't quite get on top of. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got there, but I'm mostly going to focus on how to figure out where you're at and make an actionable plan moving forward. We live in a society with constant exposure to consumption-based advertising, and we're taught hardly anything about personal finance. Many of us graduate high school, go on to college, take on student loans, get a credit card, slowly start to increase the balance on that credit card until a point where all we can do is make it until the next paycheck. We're all familiar with the hamster wheel, spinning furiously but getting nowhere. Living paycheck to paycheck feels like running on a hamster wheel because you work so hard, but at the end of it, there's no money left to show for it. Money is a boring topic for a lot of people, but it's a well-documented fact that financial habits, life expectancy, and quality of life are all directly related. You only have to learn a little bit. The tricky part is continuing to exercise the discipline to consistently live on less than you make, to pay yourself first and spend out of what's left over, and to choose to say no a little bit more often. I've consumed lots and lots of financial content. So what's important for us to know in escaping the trap of living paycheck to paycheck and growing wealthy? The best place to start is by taking an objective look at where you are now. A lot of people can't even tell you exactly how much they get paid each month. That's a problem. Get a pen and paper and be prepared to answer the following 5 questions. Number 1. What's the total value of all of my assets? Assets are things that grow in value over time. So this is going to include things like your checking and savings accounts, investment accounts, and home values. Number 2. What is the total value of my liabilities? Liabilities are going to be all the things that lose you money. So this is going to include things like student loans, credit card debt, and car loans. Number 3. How much money do you make each month before and after taxes? Number 4. How much do you spend each month? And break this spending down into necessary expenses, unnecessary expenses, debt payments, and investments. Number 5. How old are you? Where would you like to be in 5, 10, and 15 years? Setting goals is important because if you don't set a goal with an endpoint you're trying to reach, you don't really have a way of measuring progress or holding yourself accountable. For answer number 1, the total value of your assets, Fidelity recommends having 1 times your annual salary saved up and invested by the time you're 30, 3 times your salary by the time you're 40, 6 times your salary by the time you're 50, 8 times your salary by the time you're 60, and 10 times your salary by the time you're 67. The more of these assets in Roth accounts, the better. Answer number 2, look at all of your individual liabilities and their interest rates. If you have any interest rates there that are above about 6 or 7%, you should focus relentlessly on getting rid of those things. They are working incredibly hard against you. High interest debt is an aggressive headwind that will push you back faster than the stock market can pull you forward. Take your answer from 2, your liabilities, and subtract it from answer 1, your assets. And this is going to be your net worth. It's important to know your net worth because this is going to be the determining factor in wealth. It's not about how much money you make, it's about how much money you have. And so with net worth, what we're striving for is to get to a point where we're financially independent, where our net worth is great enough that we can live on the interest it generates. So take your yearly expenses, multiply that by 25, and that's roughly about the number you're going to have to get to reach financial independence. A bonus here is if you can learn to live on less, then you don't have to have as much money saved up. For answer number 3, your income, this number absolutely needs to be greater than answer number 4, your spending. If you're happy with how much money you're making, focus on trying to save and invest as much of it as you can while enjoying your life in the process. If you're not happy with how much money you're making, do something about it. Negotiate a raise. Start looking for another job. Apply for a promotion. Gain new skills. Start a side hustle. If you're consistently spending more than you're making, you're never going to escape living paycheck to paycheck. You need to find ways to increase your income, reduce your spending, or both. Slash unnecessary spending mercilessly. Now that you've gotten some baseline numbers around your net worth, your income, and your spending, let's take a look at what's generally considered the optimal order to growing wealthy. Number one, save up $1,000 in cash. Number one, save up about $1,000 in cash. This is kind of a baby emergency fund. It's not our true emergency fund, it's just a starter emergency fund. And the idea here is that if there's an emergency that happens, paying our insurance deductible doesn't put us further into debt. So save up that $1,000 and then move on to step two. Step two is maximizing your employer 401k match. If your employer does a 1-to-1 employer 401k match, then that's a 100% rate of return, which is stellar and you should take it. Number three, pay off high interest debt. In this case, high interest debt is going to be anything that is around or significantly higher than the average rate of the market return over a year. So in a given year, the average market return is going to be about 8 to 10%. Anything that's higher than that is definitely going to be high interest, and that needs to be addressed and paid down before we start investing. If we're trying to move forward by 8 to 10%, but we're being pulled backwards by 25%, we're not going to get anywhere. So high interest debt absolutely needs to go. Number four, save up 3 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund. In your 40s, this should probably be a little bit more like 6 to 12 months of expenses. And in your 50s, I think it's worth having at least 12 to 24 months of expenses saved up in cash. Number five, maximize contributions to your HSA. HSAs are quadruple tax advantaged, and they can be incredible ways of growing wealth. We're going to have a lot of medical expenses throughout our lifetime, so this is an awesome account that we can grow without paying taxes on it that we can use to pay for those expenses. Number six, maximize your Roth IRA. Number seven, maximize your contributions to your Roth 401k. Not all employer plans offer a Roth option for the 401k, so if that's the case, at this point, a traditional 401k is going to be just fine. Number eight, buy real estate, save for kid-related expenses, invest in a taxable brokerage account, etc. Number nine, generally the last thing we're going to do, pay off low-interest debt. Debt is debt. It's money that we ultimately owe to somebody else. But if I can borrow money from somebody else at 2 to 3% interest and then invest that money and make 8 to 10% interest, that arbitrage makes it worth it. But when our debts are higher than the growth that we can expect, it's not going to get us anywhere and we need to pay it down. With the answers to the earlier questions and looking at what the optimal order of growing wealthy is, take a look at where you are. Where do you fit in on this chart? If you're not where you want to be, just accept that. Accept where you are so that you can start moving forward. It doesn't do any good to wallow in shame. Learn from your mistakes and move on. Sometimes we'll take steps back in life. We might have an emergency fund that's fully funded, and then something comes up and we have to dip into it. That's what the emergency fund is for. Don't stress out about that. It did its job, and you did your job by making sure that it was there in the first place. Pause investing, refill your emergency fund to where it needs to be, and then resume investing and move on. It doesn't have to be hard. Sometimes other things in life are going to come up that derail us or threaten to derail us. Having a child, buying a house, any number of things. And we want to try and fit these things in around that order of money as well as we can. So we know we need to invest, but what do we invest in? Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard and one of the men who's been most impactful on people like you and me growing wealth, famously said, "Don't look for the needle in the haystack, just buy the haystack." It's incredibly difficult to pick individual stocks. You have to look at a company's earnings reports and cash flow statements and balance sheet. You have to look at how they're managing their equity and their assets and their debt. You have to make estimates on how much you think they're going to make in the future, discount that, decide what a fair value for the company is, and then buy when it reaches those values. Or you could get incredibly lucky. Picking individual stocks is so hard that thousands of traders on Wall Street can't even do it consistently. Since buying individual stocks is so risky and so difficult, what do? Well, we buy the haystack. It's much easier to just buy a bucket that owns a bunch of things. These buckets are called funds. Actively managed funds tend to underperform the index over time. Passively managed funds, on the other hand, track an index like the S&P 500, or they include everything in the stock market, or they include everything in a particular sector. Funds diversify what you're invested in, and so they dramatically decrease the risk of investment. Some great passively managed funds to start off looking at would be VTSAX, the Vanguard Total Stock Market, FSKAX, the Fidelity Total Stock Market, VTI, the Vanguard Total Market ETF, and VOO, the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. If you look at careers and rank them by how likely they are to have millionaires amongst their ranks, it's no surprise that numbers 1 and 2 are going to be accountants and engineers. Numbers 4 and 5 are going to be business professionals and lawyers. Surprisingly, number 3 is going to be teachers with a median income of about $61,000. It's not about how much money you make. It's about how much money you're able to save and how much money you're able to keep for yourself. It's a hard truth to swallow, but a lot of people are living well outside of their means. We have to really take a look at how we're spending our money and mercilessly cut down on the unnecessary spending. A streaming service like Netflix or Hulu or getting a coffee on the way to work is not necessary. Lack of discipline and a denial mindset are what are generally keeping a lot of people broke. Keep the big picture in mind. Living a happy, healthy, satisfying life while saving up and investing enough money to be able to eventually buy your freedom. In The Simple Path to Wealth, J.L. Collins includes a following quote about a monk who's getting approached by somebody working in the king's court. You know, if you could learn to cater to the king, you wouldn't live on rice and beans. To which the monk replies, if you could learn to live on rice and beans, you wouldn't have to cater to the king. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Share this video if you got anything of value out of it. And please feel free to leave any questions, comments, or thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much.